before much longer. And we have Karen Finch here is clerking the meeting today. So welcome to you, Karen. Good to see you. So you have some housekeeping to start with, I think.
I do. Thank you, Councillor Argyle. So this is a reminder that the meeting will be recorded and appear on the Nestrans website soon after. Members of the board can leave their cameras on but switch off their microphones until they wish to speak. Others participating, I can't even speak, should switch their microphones and cameras off until the chair brings you into the meeting. Those observing today's proceedings should have their cameras and microphones switched off at all times. If members wish to speak, please use the raise your hand button on the Teams toolbar, but remember to switch it off after the chair brings you in. I see Lucy has already started the recording, so I will now undertake the roll call for today's meeting. So, Chair, I can't see Councillor MacDonald back in, so we'll leave her for just now. Councillor Argyle.
Yes, I'm here.
Dr. Bockle.
Yeah.
Councillor Aitchison.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Carr.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Cox.
Present.
Councillor Hutchison.
Yeah.
We have apologies from Councillor Mackenzie. Colin Alanak.
Here.
Jerry Donald, sorry.
Present.
And Mr. Ian Ross has put in apologies as well.
I see Sandra's back again.
I see her smiling face.
She's
yes,
smiling. That means
so,
she potentially can hear what I'm saying. So we just got on to AOB, Sandra. So
excellent.
I wish. No, we've done the roll call and we've done the housekeeping. So I think probably you need to refer to David and Gail, and then on we go.
Thank you.
There.
Thank you for that, Peter. Hopefully that's me back. Yeah. And yeah, just moving on. It was really just to make a formal announcement, if you like, about the role of the Aberdeen City Council advisor to the board. So I think we would like to record our huge thanks to Gail Beattie, who has moved on to another job in the council, and to welcome David Dunn, who's the interim chief officer and will be taking up the role to advise the board. So welcome, David. And then on to the minute of the board meeting from the 10th of November, members.
Declarations of interest, I think. We didn't do that.
Okay, any declarations of interest? Thank you, Peter. I'm not seeing any hands, members, so if there is anything that comes up in the course of the meeting, then please feel free to declare an interest, so if you feel you should. Minute of the board meeting on the 10th of November. Any comments or queries or questions? Can we agree? That's an accurate minute. Thank you. And then I'd like to now introduce our speaker, who's going to share some thoughts on where we go with the carbon economy. So welcome to Neil Leckie. Neil is the Senior Programme Manager with the Energy Savings Trust in Scotland. And now that's an organisation that's, an independent organisation providing advice on reducing carbon emissions across all sectors, and one of which is low carbon travel, including the support of transition to electric vehicles. So over to you, Neil, and maybe we'll get a chance for some questions at the end of your presentation. So welcome.
Hello, thank you very much, and thanks very much for having me today. Really excited to be able to speak to you all and I just chat a bit about who we are at Energy Saving Trust and some of the work that we do. I do have some slides that I'll get onto. Hopefully I'll be avoiding any Microsoft Teams issues. I know it has been problematic so far. I've had similar problems, but today so far it's been good at my end, so fingers crossed. But just before I do that, I just want to quickly introduce myself, just give you a little bit more information about who we are at Energy Saving Trust, and then I'm going to cover off a range of the different options of support, funding, guidance, assistance that we offer to organisations across Scotland, but obviously with a specific focus on the Nestrans area, with some examples of some of the support and funding we have already provided in the past. Just to give you a quick bit of background about who I am, as you said, my name is Neil Leckie. I am Senior Programme Manager in the Scottish Transport team at Energy Saving Trust. I'm actually fairly new to the role, just started a couple of months ago, but I have been in the organisation for nearly 10 years now, in fact, and in the transport team for the last 3 years. So yes, my role effectively now is overseeing the wider work that we do in the Scottish transport sector, and the majority of the projects we deliver are on behalf of Transport Scotland. So I have sort of oversight and responsibility for ensuring they're being delivered appropriately and effectively, and that the outcomes we see are in line with the Transport Scotland and Scottish Government wider objectives on decarbonising transport. I think probably what I'll do now is just jump onto the slides. Hopefully this will work, so bear with me for 1 second while I get this open. If there's any problems, it's not an issue. I can happily kind of chat through everything with you without the aid of slides, but they're always quite helpful, I think, for situations like this. So just please bear with me for 1 second while I get this open. Hopefully you can see that now.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Neil.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. So just very briefly, I think there's only been a quick introduction to Energy Saving Trust, but just to kind of cover that again in a little bit more detail, we're an independent organisation that's dedicated to promoting energy efficiency, low carbon transport and sustainable energy usage. We aim to address the climate emergency and deliver the wider benefits of clean energy as we transition to net zero. Some of you may already be aware of us. I won't go into a lot of detail about who we are because I'll chat about the specific work we do shortly, which I think will give you probably a better feel for the kind of project we work on and you know what the organisation's kind of main goals and support is. But I did want to just stress that although I know today we are going to be talking about transport and that is my primary focus, as I know it is your organisations as well, as a company we do tackle the kind of wide remit of work that needs to be done to get towards that goal of net zero. So we do things involving fuel poverty, energy efficiency advice and support, we help with renewable technologies, and there's a huge amount of other things that we are involved in that are out with transport, but still I think very important to mention as from our perspective, you know, the work we're doing in effect to try and transition to net zero, it can't just be done in silos. We can't just think about transport and renewables as separate entities. Yes, there's different advice and experience to go into those work, but I think trying to link it together and trying to think about these things holistically and as a whole is one of the best processes we can do to try and achieve net zero as quickly and as effectively as possible. So as an organisation, what is it that we offer? So we support the wider spectrum of transport options, and I think in particular as the decarbonisation of transport does begin to grow quicker and quicker, and we see things developing at a very quick pace recently, we're very interested in the just transition particularly, and also in the sustainable travel hierarchy. You know, I think we're seeing in things like electric vehicles, there's been really quite impressive adoption in the last year or two, especially, although we still have a long way to go. I think there are areas where the markets begin to take over. And I think as an organisation, one of the things that we are thinking very seriously about now is how do we make sure that this very exciting, very new, rapid changes that are happening are not leaving individuals, communities, small businesses behind. So, you know, minimising inequalities, just transition, those are really key to our organisation and how we want to deliver our projects. The work we do supports a wide range of the kind of whole spectrum, I'd say, of Scottish society, really. We support individuals, businesses, charities, community groups, and also local authorities as well. We really try and leave no stone unturned and ensure that our support is available as broadly as possible. As well as looking at grant funding, loan funding, you know, actual financial support, though, we do offer things like advice, and we offer specialist reports and guidance as well from our team of specialist advisors. So sometimes funding obviously will be a kind of key component of anything we do, but a lot of time people just want to get a bit of information. We're an independent organisation, we're impartial, we don't promote a particular strategy, we don't promote any particular company or technology, so people can come to us and understand that what they'll be given is a fair, open and honest conversation with advice that will be unique to them and will give them some options and solutions they can address without having any particular agenda at the heart of it. And finally, the projects we deliver and the ones I'll talk about today are all done on behalf of Transport Scotland. So first off, I'm going to cover a little bit about our low carbon transport business loan. I've chosen today to be quite high level in terms of covering each project. So there is quite a lot of work I want to just mention. So I will be quite brief, but I think there is some time at the end for questions. So I'm more than happy to delve a bit more into detail, either at the end or even offline if there's other opportunity to do so afterwards. So in terms of our low carbon transport business loan, that's an interest-free loan that is repayable over 6 years. It offers up to £120,000 per business. So there's caps in place though for each car, van or electric motorcycle or scooter, as you can see on the screen there. But a business can apply for multiple vehicles at one time. So in essence, you can purchase a number of vans or cars or motorcycles to take you up to the £120,000 threshold. To qualify, the vehicle has to be eligible for the OZEV plug-in grants. So at the moment, that is restricted to vehicles with cars, I should say, sorry, with a recommended retail price of less than £35,000. As it's a loan, we do have to undertake administrative and checks, and there's also credit and affordability checks as well. We are accredited by the Financial Conduct Authority, so it's obviously very important for us that we lend responsibly and we are using public funds. So again, that's critical that we obviously want to try and support as many businesses as possible, but we also have to make sure we are lending responsibly and acting responsibly in terms of use of public money. But there's no admin or processing fees. So the loan is completely free to apply for. There'll be no cost whatsoever to the business. They will only pay back exactly what they borrow and not a penny else other than that. We also do offer support for electric HGVs, e-buses and e-coaches and things like that. They are a bit harder a market at the moment to try and get into, but it's an area that we are really keen to try and focus on going forward, as we are finding that passenger cars, the prices are coming down and down and down, and the market is really taking over there. So some of the larger vehicles are still a bit trickier at the moment. So they are definitely an area we're keen to try and target and support in the not too distant future. And as you can see just at the bottom there, we've got over £1.1 million paid out to businesses in the Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Council areas in the last 18 months. And many, many more applications are currently in the pipeline looking for support as well. So that will certainly be growing, I'd say, quite significantly given current demand over the next 6 or 12 months. In addition to this, just in September last year, we opened the loan up to cover used vehicles for the first time. So there's slightly different in terms of funding values available. Because it's the used market, there's a little bit more uncertainty, I suppose you could say, over the lifetime expected of the vehicle. We have a maximum of £20,000 available for a used car and £5,000 for an electric motorcycle or moped. The vehicles eligible are very similar to the loan available for new vehicles or new cars. So it's identical in terms of what's available for support. And one thing we don't allow is person-to-person sales. So just to be on the safe side in terms of ensuring we have a reliable supply chain and there's the necessary processes and security and support for customers, we do require the vehicles purchased from a UK-based dealership and not through any online purchasing or any sort of individual sales to each other. Obviously, the vehicles are a very important part of that, but similarly, once you have your electric vehicle, the question, of course, is how do you charge it or where do you charge it? So we also offer some support for that as well. We have a business charge point grant, which has been running for a number of years, and that allows any organisation in Scotland that either owns electric vehicles, whose staff own or operate electric vehicles, or in fact who are going to be purchasing EVs in the future, or even who have quite a high number of visitors or guests or anyone that uses their facilities on a regular basis that has electric vehicles. We are also allowing them to apply for funding as well to try and ensure the grant can be used as widely as possible. A grant of up to 50% of costs for a maximum value of £10,000. So if we got a quote for £6,000, that would mean we could offer a grant of £3,000. And there's also funding that can be combined with support from the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles as well. So they offer a further grant that's eligible in some circumstances to reduce the cost even more to the business. We have a wide selection of units available, hundreds of units, different power, different brands and manufacturers. So there's certainly plenty of opportunities for businesses out there to pick the unit that works for them. And we have a large network. We've got dozens of verified installers. I think we're actually over 100, in fact, as I speak today. And that, again, is covering the cross section of Scotland. So it's not just the central belt. We do make sure that our installers are available and can access the wider and sometimes hardest to reach locations in Scotland. On the business side, we have recently introduced a low emissions zone support fund for businesses. So this is open to any micro business or sole trader that's operating within 20 kilometres of a low emission zone, and they can apply for a grant of £2,500 towards the disposal of a non-compliant vehicle. Obviously, low emission zones are coming, and Aberdeen is, of course, one of those areas that will be bringing that in shortly. So this is a project we think, although it's been sort of relatively new and it's a little bit slow to start, we are seeing some quite rapid growth in that area. We've got 10 businesses that we've supported in the Northeast this financial year already. And again, demand is growing quite rapidly, and I'm pretty confident we'll see that increasing significantly in the kind of months ahead of us. So another project where it's still quite new, but we see that the way things are developing and the way that the support is moving, I think will be quite an important one for ourselves in the near future. That's the business side I've covered there. I think quite keen now to look a bit more at the community options we have available. And probably the kind of most important project for me to highlight here is our Plugged In Communities grant. So this is a fund that's available for housing associations, community organisations, and we've also expanded it recently to operating for community transport operators as well. So in the Nestrans area, since it started 3 years ago, I believe it was, we have funded 3 projects awarding over £100,000 in grant funding to Grampian Housing Association, Huntly and District Development Trust and Osprey Housing Association for them to purchase electric vehicles and operate car clubs that are available for residents of the housing association, but also the wider community as well. It has been quite a challenging project, particularly recently, as we obviously had the COVID restrictions, which have caused quite significant problems. Things like car sharing hasn't necessarily been the top of people's agenda in the last 18 months or so, which has made it slightly more difficult to launch and ensure the project is delivering. But I'm pleased to say that the majority of the challenges are now past, and we've seen already just over 24,000 zero emission car club miles to date from those 3 projects. And again, very much expecting that figure to grow and grow in the months ahead as we hopefully begin to move past the pandemic into a level that's a bit more back to normal. Just in terms of the community transport fund, so that's one that we've just opened for the first time this year, and I'm pleased to say we have offered funding to Berwickar Camp Hill Community, which is a group that supports vulnerable adults with learning disabilities and other additional support needs. And they're replacing an older fleet with a 7-seater Citroen e-Berlino, so an electric vehicle, and that will be the first one in their fleet. So quite pleased that we can get that project, and I think it's a really positive one. And yeah, the community transport angle was one that I'm very happy we've been able to support this year. And again, one I think that's got quite a lot of opportunities to grow in the future as well. Switching up a little bit, just looking now at active travel. Again, this is one that's very important for us. When we talk about decarbonising transport, we don't just want to replace every petrol vehicle out there with an electric vehicle. And there's certainly going to be times where people need to drive. We fully understand that, particularly for rural areas. It's not always possible to use active travel, but this is certainly a priority for ourselves where possible to promote this as the best option, the most suitable option where possible to individuals and to businesses. And one of the kind of key projects we have available is our e-bike business loan. Throughout the pandemic, or the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen quite rapid interest, growing interest in e-bikes, which has been, I suppose, a positive to see. And I think the challenge for us now, though, is to ensure that behaviour is maintained and it's not just a one-off, that we do see people continuing to look at active travel options and move away from cars as much as possible in the future. And the e-bike business loan is one of our tools, I suppose, to try and support that activity. So it's interest-free loan of up to £30,000 that can be used to cover electric bikes, e-cargo bikes, and also adapted cycles, which is another area that we are very keen to keep supporting, because we want to make sure that things like e-bikes are not just open to, well, they are open to everyone, even if you have a disability or a particular issue that requires more support to use an e-bike. The loan will ensure that you as an individual or as a business can access that support, and we will offer a higher level of funding to those who do need to have an adapted cycle, which can sometimes have a higher cost associated with it than a standard e-bike. We also have our e-bike grant, which has been open for the last 3 financial years. It has a £900,000 budget available this year, although unfortunately the timing of this isn't quite ideal. We've actually just recently closed applications, I'm afraid. But I just want to highlight this project, and I think it's quite an important one. And I've got some examples as well on the next slide about awards that have been made to organisations in Aberdeen City Council or Aberdeenshire Council areas in the last few years. So it's normally open to local authorities and public sector agencies, and also to further and higher education institutions, active travel hubs and community groups. And it can be used, as you can see there, just to cover a really very wide range of active travel and biking options: e-bikes, e-cargo bikes, trailers, tandem bikes, adapted cycles. Again, a very broad list there to try and support as much activity as possible. Awards for this are split into two streams. So there's one which is for smaller projects up to 25,000, and then an offer of up to £200,000 for larger projects. As I said, unfortunately, applications are closed for now, but again, just keen to show some of the work that we have done already in this area in the last few years. So there's 5 projects in total that we've supported in the Nestrans area since 2018-19, and that's 37 bikes that have been funded. You can see a list up in front of you there, so I won't go through each of them, but a couple of quite interesting ones. I think the Mid-Deeside project is a public hire scheme which is aimed at local community and tourists who are visiting the area. They purchased what's called sort of easy boarding bikes, so that they're a bit more accessible for use by all ages and abilities, to provide a bit more of, I suppose, supportive journey, supportive transport option for those who may not be familiar or sort of comfortable necessarily with e-bikes or biking in general. And Seafine are another one, just keen to highlight, as they distribute emergency food parcels to those on low incomes who cannot currently access emergency food provision due to ill health or other reasons. And they have received 2 e-cargo bikes to help with their deliveries, which again, are projects we're very happy and proud to be supporting. Along with that, we also have our e-bike trials. I think one of the bits of feedback we've got a lot from individuals, from businesses, is that they're interested in e-bikes. There's a bit of uncertainty about taking the plunge and going and buying them. People are never sure if it's right for them or for their business, and so the trials, we think, are a great way to allow organisations, to allow people to actually sample what it's like to try an e-bike out. So there's short-term trials we offer, which can be 3 days or more, or potentially even up to 3 weeks, which are for individuals, community groups, workplaces, really just any kind of organisation or individual throughout Scotland. Since we started that in 2018, our advice centre in the North East, which is run by SCARF, has delivered 429 e-bike trials. And again, we have a number of others that are still planned for this financial year. It's been particularly busy in the last few months, which is great to see, because winter is obviously quite challenging sometimes for e-bikes. So it does feel like there's still a really strong level of interest, and we are really keen to ensure people do have access to active travel options such as e-bikes, even in the winter months, although it's not always ideal. As you can see, in the current financial year, we delivered 81 e-bike trials, and one of the things we're very proud of is we have 9 long-term e-bike trials for up to 1 or 2 months to GPs and health clinics. And this is one which, again, with COVID, e-bike trials weren't always possible for us to deliver when there was restrictions on. So we used the opportunity to try and support key workers, those that were NHS or GP practices, to offer them a transport option during COVID-19, for us to use the bikes to get them out there, get them actually being utilised by people, but also to support key workers and trying to give them some options to still continue to travel to work, to travel around, but do so in as healthy a way as possible. And finally, nearly done, just kind of last slide from me here. That has been mostly, I've looked at funding there, so grants, loans, the actual financial support available, but we do also provide, I think I mentioned at the start, a bit of guidance, advice, and also a reporting service as well. So for businesses, we've got a variety of reports available to help guide them how best to decarbonise their transport. We've completed 29 of these reports for organisations in Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Council areas since the end of 2020, each of which will give them an idea about the cost and carbon savings associated with changing their transport, provide a pathway forward, and also give some advice and I guess a bit of a how-to in terms of accessing funding available. So we see them as a really key component. We can offer this funding, but we need to give people support and help to try and actually make the right decision and give them information they need to understand what's the best option for their business. And just finally, for local authorities, just touching this very briefly, we provided Aberdeenshire Council with a fleet decarbonisation report last financial year, and Aberdeen City Council with a report at the start of this financial year. These reports are quite long, detailed reports, which are really used, I suppose, to try and help the local authority identify how they should target the replacement of their vehicles and also install charging infrastructure to help meet the Scottish Government's public sector fleet decarbonisation targets. They also look at electrical capacity at depots to try and understand where best charging infrastructure can be implemented. And also we're starting to look a bit more at larger vehicles as well, given that's quite an important point in the years to come. In terms of funding, we run the Switched on Fleets grant for Transport Scotland, which is delivering grant funding to local authorities for the lease or purchase of zero-emission vehicles and the installation of electric vehicle charge points. And for the first time, in fact, this financial year, we have just started offering a top-up grant, which is going to go alongside the UK government's on-street residential charge point scheme, or ORCS, which is a great acronym, I think. So ORCS is funding, which is run by UK government, by OZEV, and that provides 75% of the cost of installing charge points on street in a local authority area where off-street parking is not available. Transport Scotland have given us funding to effectively top up that 75% by a further 25% to ensure projects can be fully funded. So we think it's a great opportunity for local authorities to try and access that little bit of extra support and give that ORCS a bit of a boost, I suppose, to try and get as much of that funding up to Scotland as possible. And that's really all from me. I appreciate that was quite a whistle-stop tour. I hope I've not given you too much or too little detail there. There is information on our website about all the projects I've mentioned there in terms of how you apply, a bit more detail on terms and conditions. So just a useful tool for anyone that's interested to know, but I've also got my contact details up there. Obviously happy to take questions at this point, but if anyone has any questions they want to take away or get in touch with me after this, I'm obviously more than happy to have that conversation as well. That's great. That's it from me. Thanks very much for your time.
That covered so much and actually was incredibly helpful. I like the Tolkien acronym at the end there as well. So I'll open it up to other members of the board to see if there are any immediate questions that they would like to ask, but I'm aware that you are available for questions by email or other ways after the meeting. I suppose if I perhaps start off, and my question is around we have a lot of some of the things that you describe happening locally anyway through Nestrans or through our local authorities, and it was maybe just to get a sense of how some of that knits together, because I know there was Civitas Portus trials and so on that went on in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire as well. So it was really just to see how that works with, we've got our own cycle development officer, John Barron, and so on. So I'm aware that, Sustrans is another organisation which provides a lot of infrastructure, but I'm guessing that you're a different type of product because it's that actual use that goes on the infrastructure that we need, because it's great having e-bikes, but we need to have the roads in which they operate as well. I think you would probably agree.
Absolutely, yeah. And what I probably should have mentioned there is we are, on the active travel side, we are part of a group which is Active Travel Delivery Partnership. So we work with Sustrans, Cycling UK, Como UK, a number of the other organisations that are very active in that area. So there absolutely is a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussion. We meet, I think, every quarter or even more frequently than that, just to talk about some of these issues and make sure that we're not kind of cutting across each other's work, but also that we are collaborating. They have expertise that we necessarily don't have, and vice versa. So that partnership, that group is, I think, very important for us and for Transport Scotland to make sure that we're looking at the whole of the work required to deliver change and that we're not missing out any kind of key components. Excellent,
thank you. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands, Neil, so you're getting off lightly this afternoon. Councillor Hutchison, Michael, on you go.
So I think there's a few other hands up as well. I see Councillor Bell and Councillor Carr. I think they had theirs up before me as well.
Well, on you go, Michael.
Okay then. Just firstly, you mentioned about the e-bike trials. I think it was 429 overall and 81 in the last year. Do you have any statistics of how successful those trials were in terms of encouraging people to then purchase e-bikes in their own right? Just one.
Sure. I don't have off the top of my head, I'm afraid, but we do have an evaluation exercise that has taken place after the trials last year. So I'm more than happy to dig that out, provide you with some figures. From memory, I think they're pretty positive. We've got, I'd say, really good feedback in terms of intentions, but I'm more than happy to take that away and find the document itself.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, thank you very much for that. The other thing was just on the ORCS funding. Just obviously, not obviously, but I represent a city centre ward, as with Sandra. We've got quite a lot of tenements, and there's a relatively small amount of parking for the population density there. How much of that's likely to be available for that sort of area? Are you looking at more kind of less densely populated areas where there's a bit more certainty about where you can park? Just if that makes sense, and just the kind of issues you have around on-street charging points for these sort of areas.
Yeah, it can be complex, absolutely. There are some challenges with the ORCS project, but the funding, so the funding is mostly delivered by the UK government. In essence, the way that we operate is we will fund any project they have approved through their guidelines. But I know from experience, they have opened it up quite significantly in the last year or two. The budget for that has grown quite a lot. And I think possibly in the past there was more restrictions, but I believe now there's quite a lot of openness in terms of what can be supported. And as long as there is the availability of on-street parking there, and there's the option to get charge points, I think there's a pretty strong chance that that will be supported through the fund, and we would certainly then look to top that up as well. So I think you're on mute there, Michael. Sorry, I don't know if you made a final point there.
So it's possible just a wee follow on to that. Just if there are any kind of issues you are kind of encountering with the more tenement city centre sort of ones, is it possible just for that to be flagged up to us at all, just so we can maybe look at our own policies if there's anything we can do to help make that easier for people in city centre and tenements and less city centre areas as well, mind you, but in more densely populated areas, just it might be helpful to know if there's particular obstacles in that sort of place. Thank you. Absolutely, no problem.
Neil, could I maybe ask you to unshare your screen, just in case that's what's stopping me seeing any hands? But I believe Councillor Bell, Philip, you've got your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So a couple of questions. Very good talk, thank you. Have you considered some of the other thinking about charging now, some of the other sort of charging systems? So there's one system that actually has, I think it's 15 circuits, but they're actually these charging points are actually at pavement level. So you actually have a lance in the boot of your car, and you plug in the charger. Actually has an intelligent sender, on a nearby lamppost. It tells you if the charge is available, if it's either working or if it's actually vacant, as it were. Are you considering that at all?
Absolutely, yeah. And when we look at sort of technology available, we are very much agnostic. We do not have a sort of prescribed list of charge points in terms of the way they work. So we will assess any unit that comes available, any manufacturer that wants to come to ourselves and give us information about their charge point. We'll obviously have to be some checks and tests and things like that done to make sure it's suitable. But we're very much keen to be, not ignoring innovation, and we're actually staying ahead of, or at least keeping up with pace of change. So yeah, I'm not sure if the manufacturer necessarily of that particular solution, but we're very happy to look at it and see if it's not one we're supporting already.
Yeah, well, I can send you the details, actually.
Please, yeah, thank you very much.
I'll do that. My second question was, with all these electric vehicles that ultimately will be whizzing around, what about maintaining them? Are you considering that at all in your offering? Because the number of technicians available for servicing electric cars, for instance, is a tiny fraction of the technicians available to service internal combustion cars. Similarly, with lots of bikes on the paths and so forth, that's also going to cause some grief. But is that something that you look at and you promote? Can you provide advice for that, for instance?
No, it's a really good question, actually, and I'll be honest, it's probably not been a kind of core part of our work in the past, but we have had conversations with AA and RAC about breakdown cover. So that's one of the solutions. I know they have started looking at things like having a kind of electric battery in the back of their van, so they can actually deal with any EVs that have run out of charge and are stranded by the side of the road. So yeah, probably traditionally it's not been as big a focus, but it's definitely something that we have in mind. And I think one that, whilst I can't make any guarantees at this point in time, I do see that as being one that we will try and pivot towards as much as we can in the future.
So thank you.
Thanks very much. I've got Councillor Carr next. George, would you like to
Thanks, Sandra, and thanks, Neil, for your presentation, and good to see some of the work that you're embarked upon. I was really just going to ask, at the moment, it's very much a rich person's luxury to be able to go down this road. Where do you think or how far away are we from getting to that point where, without grants and without subsidies, that people are going to be able to transition to some of these new technologies? Do you think we're a fair bit away from that, or do you think that it's maybe within sight rather than too far in the distance? Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Certainly one it's on our minds when we think about these options. I mean, we know it's obviously a fact electric vehicles are still more expensive. There's no doubt about that. But I can say from my time, working on our loan scheme, where we have a huge amount of data coming through, thousands of customers, we can see the value of vehicles dropping. Maybe not quite month by month, but certainly 3-4 months. Our average loan values are going down and down and down. I would say it feels to me like in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years, I think we will reach price parity. That does feel like a long way sometimes, but I feel the reason I see a lot of promise here is because there will always be higher vehicle prices. Things like Teslas will always be premium vehicles, but there's been a number of models that we are finding have been very popular. So the MG ZS has got an EV, which is, I think, retailing for about £23,000 on the road, which is, getting into the range of a sort of normal price, I would say, for a standard sort of family car. And I guess the big push for us, I mentioned, I think, is the used market. I think that's where we want to see progress being made, and that's where I think we'll be turning a lot of our time towards, because we can see people picking up used electric vehicles for £7,000 or £8,000 potentially. So I think as things grow, the market is taking over, and I think we're not far away from that price point being reached. And our goal, our focus will be to make sure we do support some of those lower cost options and provide people who maybe can't afford to buy a £25,000, £30,000 car with some funding and some help to try and support that lower end of the market.
I rather think our chair has frozen again. Either that or she's keeping very, very still. I think if that answers you, George, we'll move on. John, Councillor Cox.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Thanks, Peter. Sorry. Disposing of batteries, would there be anything where the council could apply for grants to facilitate that in terms of their recycling? So it's like just considering that at some point we're going to have to deal with that problem.
Yep. That's actually interesting, because that's something that's been at the forefront of my mind recently. So again, not one that we are currently funding, but I feel like the stage we're at now, we are seeing a bit of a pivot towards thinking about those kind of solutions. I know there has been projects in the past we have supported where we've looked at old batteries that have been taken from EVs and used as battery storage systems. So there's been projects where they've been used alongside solar PV and also alongside charge points as well, to create a kind of backup reserve. So that's one where nothing at this point in time, but definitely one in our mind, and one I think we will be discussing with Transport Scotland and seeing if there's any scope to look at that in the not too distant future.
Okay, as long as Aberdeen shares the pilot project, that'd be great there, Peter.
Yeah, why not? Why not? I don't see any other questions. So Neil, thank you on behalf of the board. Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting presentation and a good discussion afterwards. Thank you for that. No doubt we'll hear more about this. I've no doubt there'll be some thought about how we keep vehicles going when we have a 5-day power cut and all these sort of challenges ahead. The resilience of the distribution network, I think, is up there as one of the big questions at the back of all of this. But thank you very much indeed. We'll let you go now. Thanks, and we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, we still don't seem to have Sandra back, so we'll press on with the next item, which is our budget, and we have Moira Beverley here to introduce item 3.1. Moira.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good afternoon all. We'd hoped to be in a position to give you more accurate outturn but unfortunately staff have been involved in the Storm Arwen work and unable to give us a more accurate forecast for the outturn to the end of March. Expenditure to October is 1.2 million against a budget of 9.8 million, and as you can see, we are expecting work to roll into 22-23, but we do not have the full detail on this as yet. There is a budget allocation of 3.2 million for Control Station for 21-22 with no expenditure. We are still awaiting the invoice for this from Transport Scotland, who have been actively chased for this information for quite a while. The February meeting will provide more detail on the projects that will be carried forward and also the proposal for the 3-year capital programme. The board is asked to note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1, to approve the environments set out in Appendix 2, and to note the updates on projects for which Nestrans receives external grant funding. And finally, to note the Strategic Transport Fund position. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair.
Thanks very much, Moira. I can live with either chair or vice. Vice chair, I mean, sorry. Okay, thanks for that. Are there any questions, first of all, for Moira on that? I think the papers are exceptionally clear and well presented, but are there any questions? If not, no issues, we'll look at the recommendations then, which are on page 10. I think if we're happy with those recommendations, if anybody isn't, please say so. Great, Moira, thank you. And we'll move on to the next item, which is 4.1, which is the director's report, I think. If I get to that point. And by happy coincidence, we have the director here to present it. So, Rab, over to you.
Thank you very much. A fairly short director's report this time, since it's only 4 weeks since our last meeting. However, a number of meetings have been held in that period, and I've given you a very brief outline of the key ones. The two that I might perhaps highlight, we had 30 minutes with the Minister for Active Travel. The chairs of the 7 RTPs met with Patrick Harvey on the 29th of November. I think it would be fair to say in a 30-minute period, it was really only an introduction and a get to know you. He did confide that he shared a lot of our frustrations and aspirations. A lot of things we were pushing for, such as 3-year budgets, for example. I think he feels very much that that's what he would like to see as well. So I think a lot of common ground. The other one I was going to mention was Aberdeen Airport Consultative Committee met on Friday of last week. Maggie represents us on that group. I don't know, Maggie, whether you wanted to update the board, whether there's anything significant coming out of Friday's meeting, and apologies for dropping you in that without any warning.
That's all right. Nothing hugely significant. They were, I guess, thinking they were encouraging signs of number of flights and passengers, but then started to speculate as to what might happen with Omicron. So on the one hand, looking good, on the other hand, going, don't really know what's happening. And they were quite excited about the opening of the landside food and drink offering, but nothing hugely significant. I think they're partly in survival mode.
Thanks, Maggie. The report is for members to note. I see chairs back, so thank you.
A grumpy chair now.
Are you back? Oh, no.
I don't know how long I'll be back for. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going wrong with my gremlin.
I think they've maybe gone. The gremlins are at it again. Okay, we'll maybe just press on and hope the gremlins can get some gremlin-y side along. Clearly what's needed. Are there any questions for Rab on any aspects of his report? As we said, it's only a few weeks since we last looked at many of these things, so not a lot there. Interesting to hear about the meeting with Mr. Harvey. Half an hour was generous of him. Okay, in that case, we'll note that, if everyone's content to note that, and we'll move on to 4.2. Can't remember what it's called, but I know that Jen is introducing it. So, Jenny, over to you. You know
Thank
what this report's
Councillor
called, don't you?
It's the annual report.
The annual report, that's the one. Yeah.
Nestrans is a statutory duty to publish an annual report after the end of each financial year that provides information on performance of its functions. So a draft annual report is provided in Appendix 1 for consideration that covers the period from 1st April 2020 to 21st March 2021. It also includes business plan information for 21-22, and this is based on the funding allocations and project proposals as they stood at the start of the current 21-22 financial year. Should the board approve the text for this annual report, it will be designed for publication on the Nestrans website, and links to the report will then be sent to Scottish ministers and chief executives at Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire councils, and to key stakeholders and members of the North East Transport Consultative Forum. The statements that Nestrans is required to prepare in accordance with the Public Service Reform Act are appended to the annual report, but these are standalone document requirements, so if they are approved, they'll be published immediately on the Nestrans website. The intention to bring an earlier draft of the next annual report for 21-22 and business plan for 2022-23 to the board for consideration next April is mentioned, which is just to enable the current board members to consider a draft in advance of the next elections in May. The expenditure information won't be ready at this time, but many RTPs don't include this within their annual reports, and so it's suggested that this is reported separately at a later date when the factual information on financial transactions for the year is available. And I'd be grateful if the board could consider the recommendations and advise on any comments, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Jenny, thanks very much. So we're being asked to, is there any comments on the 2021 report, and to agree that we'll get the next report in April, which makes perfect sense to me, rather than leaving it to a new board. Jerry.
Thanks, Chair. Perhaps just a couple of comments around the access to healthcare element of the report. I wonder whether indeed it would be helpful, if indeed we do have the data, to draw out the impact that Near Me has had on the reduction in CO2 emissions, and have that more evidence within the report. The vaccination centres in Grampian in Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City have been well supported by Nestrans, but there's no mention of the video that was prepared to support that. And I think it's also worth mentioning as well that I think the Transport Health Information Centre really came into its own rights during COVID, and had we not had that in place, then I'm not so sure the healthcare system would have been able to respond so much to the COVID situation through the Aberdeen City and Shire area. So Jenny, I'd be happy to have a look at some of that wording with you if that helps.
Okay, thanks. It's a very high level summary that's in at the moment. It's just a short bit on each. I know there will be an annual report specifically for the Health and Transport Action Plan, but yes, if you want that beefed up, if you could, I'm happy to add to the text there before it's published.
Thank you.
Seems a good suggestion. Yeah, thank you for that, Jerry. And Jenny, if you can take that on board and have a conversation offline about the exact wording, I'm sure the board will be content to leave that to you to insert. Are there any other questions or comments on the report? I don't see any indications, so I'll assume not. And I take it that everyone is happy that we'll get the 21-22 report in April, or even yes, it is 21-22. Yes, I'm sure you will, Jenny. Not a problem. Not a problem. Okay, that's good. So we can agree the recommendations then on that one. Thanks very much, and we'll move swiftly on to the Regional Transport Strategy summary document. And Kirsty, I think you know a thing or two about the Regional Transport Strategy. You've had something to do with it, I think. So tell us about the summary.
So this report really, it's a brief report since the RTS was formally adopted at the last meeting in November. and we've publicised that, and we've just since been working on our at a glance summary document, which is presented in Appendix A. This really trying to sort of really just provide a flavour of what's in the strategy, and it focuses very much on the policies, the priorities, and then a very brief summary under each of the key headings of the strategy. So 11 pages, down from about 111. So we will, if approved today, we'll then circulate that alongside the full strategy around all our stakeholders, including any TCF and people that have responded to the consultation. The strategy is already available on our website. This is just a supplementary document. Also, in terms of monitoring and evaluation of the strategy, we've been working on a baseline monitoring report for this annual headline indicators, and that's been informed by a workshop that we had back in August, and also discussions at the board meeting in November. So that will be key headline indicators linked to each of the 6 priorities, but unfortunately we've not been able to present a final version of it to this meeting. We're still working on that, and it's our intention that we would circulate that to the board prior to the next meeting, and then publish it following approval by the chair and the vice chairs, if that's agreed. So the recommendations of the report really are just to agree the at a glance summary for publication, subject to any comments, and to agree that we circulate to the board a baseline monitoring report and publish that if approved by the chair and the vice chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kirsty. I like it. I think your at a glance summary is going from 111 pages to 11 is quite an achievement, and you've managed to capture, I think, all the key points. I'm very pleased with it. Colin.
Just come off mute. Yeah, just two minor points for me. I think I would. Did you consider putting in the transport hierarchy strategy into the document as well? Because I think that's, for me, that's quite a powerful little, at a glance visualization of what we're looking at. The other thing, and this is just a bugbear that I have for all of these types of documents, is the huge amount of the photographs at the back and at the front. If people are printing these off when it comes, I know we try not to print off the documents, but it's just a lot of ink that goes into those last things. It's just a personal bugbear of mine.
Yes, I did consider the transport hierarchy, and I can reconsider that if because we do have a diagram of it in the main strategy document. I think it came down to sort of the bit where we reference that in the main strategy, and then where we've sort of summarised in here, it's maybe slipped out. So, but if you'd like me to consider putting that back in, we can work on referencing it, and because it would, rather than just an image, I think we would need to discuss just in the text what it is and why it's important, so we can do that. And I note your point on the pictures. I think we were trying to get a consistency across the 2 documents, make them look the same but slightly different. But it will just be circulated digitally, and I guess up to yourselves whether you want to print it.
Yes. Okay, I think nobody's insisting that it's printed, so it's a matter of choice if people want to consume ink. Otherwise, you can just look at the pictures and enjoy them. Okay, and the other point, as Kirsty says, she'll take that on board and add that in. So that's good. Thank you for that, Colin. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Any other observations on this one? If not, can we agree the recommendations, which are to agree for publication, subject to that one amendment? Kirsty, did you want to come in?
Are you happy just to ask if will just be a little bit of revised text, I think, around about the transport hierarchy? Are you happy that we just take that on board and then carry on with publishing it, or I'm just wondering about bringing it back, or if you're content for us just to make those changes?
Speaking for myself, I'm more than content for you to do that, Kirsty. You know the subject backwards, so it's your document. You know how that will fit in, and we can trust you to do that absolutely. So that's fine. And then the baseline monitoring will go out, or be circulated, I should say, once it's been signed off by the chair and vice chairs, assuming the chair is contactable, of course. Okay, That's good. We'll agree those recommendations. Thank you very much, Kirsty, for that. It's a really good piece of work. And we'll move on to a really interesting paper on decarbonising the Scottish transport sector. And Paul Finch, I think, is here to introduce this one. Paul, yep, over to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Argyle and the board. I guess the purpose of this report, and I suspect this is more of a context-setting report for awareness, but I wanted to highlight to the board what was recently published by Transport Scotland and to start to bring out some of the key issues around this and what the regional response will be. Particularly as this is an agenda item that will no doubt be with us for some time. It will be what really defines our work for the next 4, 5, 6, 10 years, perhaps even as well. So I didn't want this to be hidden in publications and consultations. I just wanted to bring it out and give it a little bit of profile. So there are national targets to achieve net zero by 2045. And we know that in Scotland, transport accounts for over 1/3 of the emissions. And it's the sector that's actually showing the least progression in terms of that reduction. So it's an important issue coming off the back of the COP26 conference. At the last meeting, I know there was discussion about all the various different targets there are around the different modes. And we've tried to summarise that in Appendix A across the different jurisdictions and the different modes. So hopefully that's useful to yourselves. And included within that is the Transport Scotland, the Scottish Government's target to reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030 against a 2019 base, which is forming part of the drive to decarbonise the transport sector. I want to highlight some recent research that was published by Transport Scotland, which indicated what decarbonisation could mean. And I think that the summary of that document was it can't just be technological change, it has to be technological change married alongside behaviour change as well. And I think for the regional transport partnerships and our local authority partners, what this might mean, I think I've summarised in some of the paragraphs in 3.4, 3.5 and 3.6. Building on this research, Transport Scotland are publishing or will be publishing a route map as to how we can work together to achieve this in the new year. And what they are prioritising is what Neil was talking about just transition and recognising that there actually will be regional differences across Scotland just because of the different contributions that different regions will be able to make to this issue. We believe that the regional transport policy framework and our project plans are largely consistent with the outcomes that are being sought. We do need to do more work regionally about what this could look like, the opportunities and the benefits, but also how we might respond to the vehicle kilometre reduction target and how that contributes to decarbonisation. Obviously, one is means to the other. And I think in reflection, there has to be some kind of partnership between the government, Nestrans and local authorities. What we can offer is a focus on sustainable and active travel, appropriate regional analysis, communications, marketing expertise, certainly coordination with public transport providers and other stakeholders, an integrated approach to land use planning and economic development, and we can continue to exploit our regional expertise in hydrogen. I guess our ask of the government would be, we need a collaborative approach here. We need funding models that are optimised for delivery. We need governance that works and is efficient for the business cases and our stag appraisals that don't take 2 years to get through. There needs to be work on public transport fares and network development. And if there are discussions about demand management and how we pay for motoring, that has to be undertaken within a consistent national framework. So that was some thinking that we have been doing around this subject, and we've presented it in this report. And the recommendations are to note the publication of the Decarbonising the Scottish Transport Sector Research Report by Element Energy, to note that the regional transport strategy and associated transport projects do provide a delivery framework for the challenge of decarbonisation. But thirdly, to support the development of a regional policy response to transport decarbonisation and the national 20% reduction in vehicle kilometre target. So that's all I'd like to say in support of the report, and there may be questions and points of discussion.
May well be. Paul, thank you very much. I think it's an incredibly helpful report because it is a very complicated landscape with UK government announcements and Scottish government announcements, which do tend to be different. And having that context set out in Appendix A, I think, is incredibly helpful as a way of clarifying some of that. I think the message I take from this is that there's a huge challenge ahead. And the investment in new infrastructure, new technologies, both from private and particularly from the public sector, from government in particular, is going to be very significant if we're to catch up with Europe. Never mind deliver these particular targets. We're well behind where Europe is on a lot of these things. So it's going to be tough, and it's going to need some hard thinking and hard decisions, particularly around the funding side of things. After which introductory muse from me, I shall go to, I think, George, you were first. I'll take you first anyway. Councillor Carr and then Councillor Bell, Philip after that. So, George.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and thanks for your summary there. I think it's summed up kind of where I am, and certainly I think that's the benefit of having Nestrans cover city and shire. Where we are in the shire, we've seen a significant reduction in terms of public transport infrastructure. But that's maybe not just all to do with, the service. A lot of it has got to do with public expectations, public independence. There are all sorts of things in the mix here which are going to be formidable things, as you said, Chairman, to overcome in the next few years. And that's going to be a significant challenge for us. So I was really just going to ask you, Paul, where you and how long you think and whether we are going to be able to reach this transition, because certainly in the rural areas we're miles behind where we are in urbanised areas. And for example, if I went down to London, I wouldn't dream of taking my car to London. I would just go there, and the public transport's great. It's just there. It runs 24 hours a day, goes where you want, all the rest of it. But there's no way I would ever take a bus to Auchinblay, because then I'm bound to get back within a week. So, these are the real challenges that we face. And as the Chairman said, it's a very formidable challenge, to have this modal change, bearing in mind that people themselves are changing their expectations from public transport as well. So interesting to hear what your response is. But thanks for the paper. I think it's very well written, very well laid out. So thanks for that.
Thanks, George. We'll have a whip round and buy you a ticket to Auchinblay just for fun.
The bus to Auchinblay sounds like a novel, doesn't it? Sounds great.
It does. Paul, do you want to quickly respond to that now?
Okay, I will say, in terms of public transport, I think it's very interesting what Aberdeenshire Council have achieved in the Inverurie area with their model of, I can't remember what it's called now, the turn up and go bus service. I think that's really quite interesting to see what could be done and how the public have responded to that, albeit I note that that is an expensive option. So I'll just say, very interesting. It'd be good to see how that one turns out in terms of that public transport offering. And I think you and his colleagues should be commended for and the council should be commended for trying that in a rural area. I think that's very, very interesting. It is interesting to think that I saw some national model information the other day which indicated that North East probably wouldn't get to that 20% reduction. The maximum it could probably get was around 10% reduction because of the higher contribution of some other areas in Scotland due to the structural constraints on the issues that Councillor Carr has also said. But I would also say that you possibly can get a big impact from a few people who regularly travel a long distance could actually make a bigger proportion of that reduction in carbon than, say, 20 people in an urban area who use their car for a very short journey. So there's an interesting trade-off when you talk about carbon emissions and some of these things. It could actually be that the increase of working from home for a cohort of people who might regularly have perhaps, say, commuted from, and I pick an area here, just off the top of my say Banff or perhaps from Lawrencekirk, who are regularly journeying by car into town, if they were able to work, and possibly a number of them are already remotely 2 days, 3 days a week, perhaps that also will be having a big impact on that decarbonisation agenda as well. So there's There is an urban argument. I understand where that opportunity is, but then there's also some of that you can actually get a big impact from some of these longer distances. Very interesting. I think we just need to keep on looking at how the analysis works out and how we can form our arguments to come a coherent action plan in our discussions with Scottish Government around the facts, really.
Okay, thank you.
No, thanks for that, Paul. And you're right. I think the new arrangements or the trial in Inverary was quite a bold decision. It's a radical change, but a sort of change we'll have to see in the way public transport is delivered. The days of very large buses trundling around the countryside with no passengers on them, or very few, we have to get away from that. And I think it's an interesting one, and one we're following very closely. And I echo your thanks to Ewan and his team for that. Philip, Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of things. So at 2.1, I think it's just a correction required. It says limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees C by the end of the century. I think it should be by 2050. But the other thing I really wanted to say was just with regard to carbon emissions. So I note that well, UK government 2035, Scottish government 2032, where they want to actually ban the sale of new petrol diesel vehicles. But I'm minded to comment, though, that when you look at the life cycle CO2 from battery electric as compared to hybrid vehicles, whether they be full hybrid or plug-in hybrid, there's actually not that much difference. Well, I mean, when I say not that much, is like a 2-to-1 ratio. But over the global scheme of things, though, and with the lack of charging infrastructure, possibly full hybrid is something that, or plug-in hybrid, where you can space out the charging, might be something that perhaps should be given some more careful consideration. Was really what I just wanted to say. That's purely on life cycle CO2 emissions. You mean taking into account refining the materials, making the batteries, making the electricity to charge the batteries, and ultimately just breaking up the vehicle at the end of the day. It's something that people, I've got some learned papers I could send you, but anyway, that was it. Thanks.
Paul.
And I think, again, the argument around full EV or hybrid EV, given the experience that this region has just experienced over the last 5 days, week, I think that will hang in people's memory for a very long time to come, and they will always be thinking about what the backup is or what's the plan B. And that's just a fact of people's real life experiences. I mean, I'm sure people in the countryside, or going back to Councillor Carr's point about the paraffin and the gas cookers, the gas stoves, I would, if in reality, I suspect that people will not easily go to full electric in some of these areas for some time. But yes, very interesting points about that whole life carbon things. And I think as we develop this response, we will need to be taking that into account. It's not just the tailpipe emissions, it's that whole life emissions as well. So thank you for that.
No, thanks. And there is, of course, a carbon cost to people working from home, as we saw on the last meeting. So these things are never straightforward and never easy. Very easy to write slogans and set targets. It's delivering them by whoever sets the target. It's not a political point, is the challenge, and how we get there. Good, thanks for that. Are there any other comments or questions for Paul on this? I think it's really helpful paper, Paul. It really is. Thank you very much for that. Can we agree to note the contents then, and we can move on? I did see our chair did appear very briefly, but she's been gremlined again. So, oh, having said that, she's shaking her head sadly.
I'm just going to let you carry on with the rest of the meeting, because I don't know how long I've been here. I have been listening in the background, but okay. Please, Peter, you're doing a sterling job, so please carry on.
Okay. I hope you didn't hear the bit where I was talking about you. We'll move on in that case and talk about rail is next, and the rail update. And Rab, you're doing this one for us.
Thanks, Chair / Deputy Chair. Rail update, yes. A couple of points to update the board on. First one, Inch. I'm really pleased to say that we've now concluded the technical appraisal of the accessibility to Inch Station, and the minor comments that we had from Transport Scotland have now all been addressed. So that, from our perspective, that's now a piece of work which has been done and a box ticked. But the really critical part now is where we go from here. And we'll be looking to the Strategic Transport Projects Review and the annual access for all funding for stations as they come forward over the next year. So I'm really optimistic and hopeful that we've now done all we can to get Inch into position in terms of all the background work has been there, and that it's really about over to others in terms of delivery and priority for that station. I think we've demonstrated the importance of Inch in a national context and how far behind it is in accessibility terms from other stations across the network. The second one is the Aberdeen to Lawrencekirk corridor, the multimodal study that we've been working on. I think we briefly mentioned to the last meeting there had been over 1,000 formal responses to the consultation. 1,111 was the final count. And the key findings, I think, could be summarised, although it's a 60-page consultation report, which we sent a link to as a separate item because we managed to break the link that was in the report, and apologies for that. But I think on Monday, a link was sent to the full report. So 60 pages, but we can summarise it as key findings. Calls for improved active travel on the corridor, improved bus services, particular concerns about the cost of bus services, and a need for further rail infrastructure, particularly coming from Cove and Newton Hill. I guess no surprises there. That was probably where we thought this study was going to go, but we've gone through the proper process in Scottish Transport Appraisal Guidance of looking at the whole corridor and a multimodal issues aspect. So that report, we can now look at moving on to the next stages with that base information behind us. So looking for members really to note these two reports and the progress on them. Happy to take any questions though.
Thanks very much, Rab, and it will not surprise you to know I'm really delighted to hear the progress that's been made on Inch, and at last we've got to that point where Transport Scotland have everything they could possibly need and can put it right to the top of the list of priorities and get it done, in which case we'll all be very happy. So thank you very much indeed to you and the team for all the work that's gone into that. I know it's been a lot of work. It's a really important project, so I'm delighted to see the progress being made there. And I think there's more to be done to make sure it's pushed along, but a major milestone for all that. And also on the multimodal study, good stuff in there. And I think everybody did get the link that came out on Monday. So thanks for that. Any other comments? George, over to you. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rob, for your comment and also for your summary. I did read the multimodal. It was a long document to get through, and I think really just to focus on the rail side of it. I've raised it in Nestrans before. We've got this conundrum between trying to reduce times between the cities, but that may come at the expense of stops and connectivity with our rural stations. That's something we're still picking up. I just wondered if you had a comment on that and making sure that view is also being fed in, because I certainly know some of the consultees raised those very points, because we've always advocated Crossrail and linking in, and people standing on stations for 20 minutes, half an hour. It's just exactly what we were saying earlier, that people just do not and will not accept these sort of things nowadays in public transport. If we're going to get people to have that modal shift, we're going to have to up our game, and the only way we can do that is by listening to what they're saying and to respond to their complaints, because Lawrencekirk Station was a great success when it opened first, but there's been an erosion of the train stopping there. So anyway, just comment from you on that point? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Carr. It's certainly something that has come out through the consultation. I mentioned Cove and Newton Hill, which we might have expected, where there were limited access to the rail network. But in terms of actual points made from people who were using the rail network, one of the key ones was the lack of options that are available. And I think Lawrence Kirk came out specifically with that, and access to the south. It is something that has been acknowledged by ScotRail, and in their medium-term plans, it is something that they're looking at, is a stopping service between Aberdeen and Dundee, which would stop at all stations. So yeah, we'll have to see how that fits in with the developments of Aberdeen to Central Belt improvements. But that certainly is one of the aspirations that the rail network, the rail industry has, is to improve that connectivity whilst also having express services which can improve end-to-end journey times, but making sure that they can fit in terms of timetabling, and that the stopping train isn't holding up the express train, etc., is part of the challenge. But that's work that's ongoing and certainly has been recognised both in this consultation, but also elsewhere.
Thanks, Rob. Colin.
Yeah, just something I picked up the other day that was mentioned when you mentioned about connectivity and sort of integration was during COP26, Glasgow had managed to get together with some for their delegates and everything to have a connected transport pricing and ticketing arrangements, so that you could get off a train and get straight on a bus, or hire one of the bikes, the e-bikes and things to get around. Just with the train, the rail things there, has there been any discussion about that in any of your meetings that could be taken on a national or regional level with us?
It's certainly something that the regional transport strategy recognises, Colin, in terms of the need to better integrate ticketing and how we pay for transport. Aberdeen City Council are developing an app which I think is called GoAbs, which will help to have on a single platform all of the transport offerings within Aberdeen, including car parking, car hire, bike hire when it comes in, as well as information, which will bring that all to the user. I think the intention is that would be wider than just the city and would be regional. I am hesitant to say that it will quite offer the answer to all of your question, because I think the difficult one in all of that is rail. The rail is separate in a way in terms of the way it's funded and that rail tickets are paid for. But again, I think nationally there is an aspiration to think, how can we link up ferries, rail, bus, and the services that are being offered locally, including bike hire, car hire, etc. So I think when we talk about mobility as a service, that's, I think, what we're talking about is, can we have a single platform that all services can be charged for through a single means, a single platform? And I think the sooner that we can get to a stage where that becomes almost a monthly charge rather than paying coins in a bus operator's fare box, but actually moving to something that maybe comes off the direct debit once a month, I think psychologically that would make a big difference going forward. I guess the summary of what I'm trying to say, Colin, is yes. It's certainly something that we recognise is important in making sure that transport options are available, the information's available, and paying for them is both easy and also that you get the best deal, because a lot of the bus operators are now looking at ways that they can cap fares so that the machine would know what the best deal was for the trips you had made over a certain day or a week, and you wouldn't be overcharged. So capped fares is something that's being spoken about as well.
Okay, It's just that they heard that they trialled something at COP26, but if it was just limited to the delegates, then it would have been kind of easier to do. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that question and answer. Are there any other questions on this one or comments, or can we note the position on Inch with satisfaction, I think, and note the progress on the multimodal study? Okay, thank you very much. Both noted. Next item is item 7, the progress report. Unless there's anything you want to flag up, particularly, Rab, it's there for any questions from members.
Nothing in particular, thanks, Chair.
Okay.
It's an update report which gives members a little bit of information on the plethora of projects that are ongoing, and gives an opportunity to ask questions.
Indeed. The scope of the work is quite phenomenal. But we met quite recently, so I'm not necessarily expecting any questions. Okay, that's fine. We'll note the progress report with appropriate thanks. As always, a lot of work goes into that. And we'll move on to publications and consultations. And I think we're back to Paul for publications and consultations. Paul.
Thank you very much, Councillor Argyle. So just a couple of consultations, a couple of publications to bring to the board's interest. The first one is there's been a consultation on Scottish aviation strategy. Our response to the questions is presented in Appendix 1 to that report. Generally, I've tried to very much align our responses to that of the regional transport strategy, noting that there is a drive to reduce dependence on air links, but for this region, air links will always be important, and the access to hub airports, Scandinavia, etc., and the Northern Isles will continue to be part of the fabric of our regional transport network. So the responses are there. If there's any questions or comments, that's probably what we would submit if people are happy with that. NPF4, National Planning Framework 4, has been published. We will bring back a report on that in February. From a first look, the transport side of things look broadly what we would be expecting from the Northeast, but we will dive more into that. The Union Connectivity Review has been published. You may recall we had a consultation response on that this time last year. Most of our comments have broadly coincidentally been taken on board. Proposals for a replacement for the 10T network seem to have been taken on board with a UK net. The proposals for their rail network appear at this point sketchy, unfortunately, particularly in terms of how we would be accessing high-speed rail. Although the proposals around domestic aviation and access to ports do align with regional ambitions. The Cairngorms National Park have done a consultation on partnership plan, and again that is very much in line with our regional transport strategy, and hopefully our consultation response, which I drafted, confirms our support for that and our willingness to continue working collaboratively with them as they go forward on their transport projects. There's a piece of publication on public sector leadership on global climate emergency, which for Nestrans probably means that we've got to do targets and an action plan around our carbon reporting. We had a short report on that last month, but I don't see that being a big challenge and would probably improve it. And anything to note also is that Sestran are doing a consultation on their regional transport strategy. So a couple of consultations, a few publications to bring to your awareness.
Thanks very much, Paul. I think for completeness in terms of that report, I had better ask my interest in the Cairngorms National Park to be noted. I am on the board of the Cairngorms National Park Authority. There is a dispensation in place that allows me to take part, but I think it should be recorded. Karen, if you could pick that up for me. Any questions on any of that? No? Okay, that's quite easy then. We have recommendations, quite complicated set of recommendations on page 156 and 157. But if everyone's happy with those recommendations, with thanks then to Paul for that, we'll move on to item 9, and that's the information bulletin, and we're back to Rab, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Information bulletin, a couple of points that I would bring to members' attention, if I may. One, at the last meeting, there was a question asked about progress on the bike share scheme in Aberdeen. So we contacted the City Council officers and are told that there has been progress on that, although it is affected by global issues, particularly around the supply of e-bikes. However, the progress is looking as though there will be a 400 e-bike scheme in place in the city, and the intention is to launch that in March of 2022. We can bring further information back to the board as we learn more about that scheme, but at the moment it is progress, but likely to be spring next year when the scheme is launched. I also wanted to mention Get About. Our focus over the last few months has been on safety, particularly winter safety, with a Be Bright at Night campaign, which has picked up some good publicity both locally and actually more widely. And finally, just to say that media coverage, there's decent coverage about the Be Bright at Night campaign, as I mentioned, and also about the approval of the regional transport strategy. So information bulletin there really for members' information, awareness and for noting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rob. The Be Bright campaign is a hugely important piece of work. Just the other day I saw somebody riding their bike wearing dark clothes, no lights, no nothing. Hugely dangerous activity. So the more we can get that message out, the better. Michael, Councillor Hutchison, you wanted to come in.
So it was just on a similar point. I was just hoping to touch on the Be Bright at Night scheme. Can I just check that's also reminding drivers just to kind of look out for folk who maybe sometimes aren't lit up for whatever reason, which I realise is like there is an onus on cyclists and the likes to try to brighten up if, say, like if the light should cut out or whatever. I just sometimes people are walking at times I hadn't expected to, just as that other side to that campaign as well, not just on the more vulnerable road users, but also on those in cars, to be aware that people might not be lit up.
Thanks. Rob.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Hutchison. Very much that is the intent of the campaign, is to get drivers to look out for pedestrians and cyclists, and to make sure that pedestrians, cyclists, etc. Are doing what they can to make sure that they are being noticed. The work is being done through, we have a partnership called Road Safety North East Scotland, which includes the councils, Police Scotland, Fire and Rescue and others, and has recently been brought forward for a motion in the Scottish Parliament commending the work. So it's one thing that I've been reminded that I should have mentioned. So thanks for that. But yeah, it's I think Kelly has shared it on the link to the Scottish Parliament. So your recognition of that work, of the partnership, and also of Get About having put forward some of the funding to enable these things to actually be delivered. But yeah, very much, Councillor Hutchison, about both sides. I was going to say of the argument, but we're trying to imply it's not an argument. It's very much we're all in this together and we should be looking out for each other. Thank you.
No, thanks very much, Michael. That's a good point. And Rab, for your answer. I don't see any other comments or questions on this item. So if we can note that, I think we can. We'll move on to item 10, conferences and presentations. And you again, I think, Rab.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Just for information, really, but I wanted to highlight that there have been a couple of rail stakeholders briefings that Nestrans has been represented at recently, both by LNER and Cross Country. I think it's fair to say there have been difficulties in the rail industry, but I think it's good to see that they are now starting to talk to customers and stakeholders. They recognise the difficulties there have been, and that they are trying very hard to make sure that things are improving significantly going forward. So it's again just really for members noting.
Thanks very much. I think we can probably note that. We can. Excellent. Thank Thank you very much. And finally, we have pending business and reports for future meetings. And Rab, you again.
Thanks, Chair. Paul's already mentioned that the National Planning Framework is available at NPF 4, and we'll be looking to bring a report to the next meeting on that. We're also awaiting the outcomes from the Strategic Transport Projects Review, which we believe will be published probably towards the end of January, early February. And obviously we'll be waiting to see what that says and the implications for the North East. A couple other reports there that we will bring forward in the new year, updating the board on Bus Partnership Fund, updating them on the outcomes from the Live Labs scoping work, which has been ongoing. And we also thought it was a while since we'd done anything on community planning partnerships. So we'll bring these reports to future boards. And I think we've already mentioned that we would look to bring forward the annual report for next year, or the current year rather, to the April meeting. And perhaps at that time we could also look at almost an end of term report in terms of the 5-year cycle that the current board has brought forward.
Rob, thanks very much for that, and some interesting matters for us once we get into the new year. But I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. So first of all, thank you all very much for attending, for participating, for your contributions. Secondly, apologies from our chair for the gremlins that have got into her system today. I hope stern action will be taken. But finally, from me and from my fellow Vice Chair Maggie and from Sandra, the Chair, may we all collectively wish you a very, very happy Christmas, a peaceful one, and every good wish to all of you for 2022, which I sincerely hope will be less interesting than 2021. Thanks all very much indeed, and we'll see you in that said year, 2022. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.